The morning sun peeks over the temple as a bell rings loud enough to wake the dead. Princess Olga stands before the priest, who claps his hands and grins. 1,000 days of prayers, complete. He eyes her carefully, asking if she's exhausted. 3 years of kneeling and chanting would have turned most people into stone. She shakes her head. She's fine, but her husband's probably counting the days on the walls by now. The priest sighs, rubbing his temples. Fine, fine. He'll get the carriage and knights ready, but if she faints on the way, she's on her own. The carriage rattles down the road. It still feels unreal. 3 years, and she's finally heading home. Her mind drifts to the memory of Sergei hunched over, shoulders shaking. She had sat beside him, patting his back. He hadn't looked up, just muttered that she didn't understand. The crown prince was his brother, that was the problem. She had frowned, confused, until he let out a bitter laugh. Their father and brother thought he was an embarrassment. If his brother took the throne, he wouldn't live to see it. He had begged her to pray. 1,000 days. A saintess's prayers couldn't be ignored. He knew it was a lot, but she was the only one he could trust. 1,000 days later, she's on her way back, hoping it was enough. The carriage rolls forward until, thud. It stumbles over a rock. The rider quickly apologizes, hopping down to inspect the damage. A cracked wheel. That's not going anywhere. Olga sighs, asking if there's a place nearby for repairs. The rider nods. Duke Mikhail Rurak's castle is close. Of all places. Of all people. Mikhail, the beast of Rurak Castle. His reputation is the stuff of nightmares, fierce, cruel, and, if the rumors are true, an absolute menace to anything wearing a skirt. Olga reminds herself not to judge a man she's never met. Still, this is the last place she wants to be, especially since Sergei can't stand him. She decides to wait for the repairs, leave as soon as possible, and never set foot here again. By the time she finally arrives home, the sky is dark. The rider stops the carriage, announcing they've reached their destination. As she steps down, the knights rush toward her, clearly caught off guard. No one sent word about her return. She waves them off. No need for that. She asks about Sergei, but the leader of the knights stammers, unsure of his whereabouts. She glances up at the tower. A light is still on. That's enough for her. She tells them she'll go to him herself and doesn't want anyone announcing her return. The knights hesitate, exchanging glances, but she ignores them. The maids whisper from the shadows. Most political marriages are cold, distant, but these two seem happy. At least, that's what everyone believes. The truth? Sergei makes sure they do. Olga storms into the tower, heart pounding, only to see Sergei tangled up with Ursa. Her brain refuses to process the scene. He barely looks surprised, just asks when she got here. Ursa stammers, trying to explain, but Olga isn't in the mood for stories. 1,000 days apart, forbidden from even seeing each other, yet she never doubted him. She had prayed, felt his presence from afar, held on to every memory of him like a fool. And now this? She turns to Ursa, eyes burning. Out of all people. The same Ursa who once struggled to be accepted because of her background. The same Ursa she had defended, vouched for, stood by. And this is how she repays her? A wave of dizziness hits. Her legs give out. Sergei catches her, telling her to calm down, calling it a misunderstanding. She jerks away. A misunderstanding? Her best friend in bed with her husband, in her home, and he calls it nothing? He insists it isn't serious. She stares at him, realization crashing down. She wasted 1,000 days praying for this man. He doesn't deserve to be king. The words leave her mouth before she can stop them. His face darkens. Watch her mouth? Oh, so he's finally done playing the victim? His expression twists with anger as he grabs her, voice sharp. No one mocks him, not even her. She laughs, bitter. Forgiveness? He's the one making a mistake. The prayers may be over, but she hasn't spoken her final wish to the goddess. His grip tightens before he suddenly shoves her back. Her breath catches as she stumbles toward the balcony. Tears fill her eyes as she calls out to the goddess. Sergei yells at her to go ahead and pray. She won't get an answer. He'll send her to the goddess himself. Then, he shoves her off. Wind rushes past as she falls. She squeezes her eyes shut, praying with everything she has. If her 1,000 days of prayers meant anything, let her wish be granted. Let her not die a miserable death. Muffled voices surround her. Someone says they might have hit her too hard. Another snaps at them to wake her up. Her eyes fly open. Her vision clears. Ursa stands over her. A loud voice rings out, accusing her of settling the score. Ursa's voice rings out, furious, demanding how a mere slave girl dares to act like that. One of the ladies sighs, saying they should just leave since Stasia is still breathing. Another agrees, pointing out that the guests will be here soon. Ursa glares at her like she's something stuck to her shoe and says she's lucky this time. Too much to do, so she'll let it slide, but next time, she'll make her regret it. A maid hurries to Stasia's side, says she looks unwell and should rest. Stasia. That's the name the maid calls her. The final proof that she's not Olga anymore. The maid tells her to go to her room and wait until she's needed. Slowly, she stands up and turns toward the mirror. The face staring back isn't hers. It belongs to someone else, yet somehow, it's hers now. She never expected her wish to be granted like this. Before waking, she had drifted in a trance, a voice calling her name. Gentle, almost pitying. The voice of Goddess Never. Olga had asked if she had been brought back to life. Never told her no, her life had ended. But because she had completed 1,000 days of prayer, she would be granted a wish. Olga didn't even hesitate. She wanted to return, to live again, to take revenge on Sergei. The goddess sighed. As a deity, she couldn't allow personal vengeance. But if the prophecy was true, Sergei would drown the continent in blood. Olga had frozen, barely able to believe what she was hearing. Sergei? That Sergei? Never confirmed it. If her revenge could stop a disaster, then maybe it wasn't just vengeance, maybe it was justice. The wish would be granted. There was a catch. A body and soul, once separated, couldn't be put back together. If she returned, it had to be in the body of someone who shared her blood and had died while she was still alive. Only one fit the description. A young girl's image formed in her mind, and the goddess spoke her name, Stasia. Olga had never heard of her. Then the truth hit her like a slap. She had a half-sister. The goddess said everything would make sense once she returned. By the time she opened her eyes, she would no longer be Olga. She would be Stasia. Now, standing before the mirror, she understands. Her new life is thanks to her half-sister's body. Memories flood her mind, memories that aren't hers. Stasia, a girl forced to live like a servant in her own father's house. A girl whose life had been miserable from the start. A voice snaps her back to reality. A maid bursts in, saying she's rested enough. The guests will be here soon. Stasia shakes off her thoughts and rushes out. The second she steps outside, Ursa's hand cracks across her face. The sting is instant, but the anger burns hotter. Ursa's eyes blaze as she demands to know who gave Stasia permission to leave the mansion. Another maid bows, quickly explaining that they only went to the kitchen for extra hands. Ursa glares, then orders Stasia to kneel and apologize. She swallows down the humiliation. She's not Olga anymore. She's Stasia. Slowly, she kneels and apologizes. Ursa sneers, says she better not leave the kitchen again. She won't be anywhere near the guests. Another maid rushes in. The guests have arrived. Ursa huffs and storms off to greet them. Stasia stays put. Nearby, two maids whisper. One mutters that Stasia is surprisingly pretty for a servant. The other snorts, saying Ursa's temper is bad enough without competition. Better to keep their distance. It's dangerous to get on Ursa's bad side. Before she can dwell on their words, someone orders her to peel onions. She sighs. So this is her new life? Suddenly, the kitchen empties. The maids rush out, eager to catch a glimpse of the guest. Stasia follows, curiosity getting the better of her. But as soon as she sees who it is, her whole body freezes. Standing at the entrance is Lady Olga. Her former self. Ursa greets her with a bright, fake smile, like nothing ever happened. She stares, unable to process what she's seeing. This isn't just about her coming back as Stasia. Olga is here. Alive. Breathing. How? A maid snaps at her, annoyed. Didn't she hear? There are onions to peel. She forces herself to nod, mumbling that she heard just fine. Stasia peels onions, her mind racing. She asked for revenge and woke up in her half-sister's body. Stasia had died the same day Olga was supposed to. Since her soul was gone, Olga took her place. She runs through everything she remembers. Stasia had died from constant abuse, and it happened around the time Olga visited Ursa. That means she didn't just get a new body, she got sent back in time. She's alive before the wedding, before everything fell apart. If that's true, then she has a chance. She can stop the marriage and save Olga. But first, she has to prove she doesn't belong here. She's just a maid right now, but there's something she still has, her mother's golden ring. The family name is engraved on it. If she takes it to her father, Marquis Tolstoy, he'll have no choice but to acknowledge her. He's ambitious enough to see another daughter as a useful asset. Maybe he'll even be happy about it. She walks down the passage, lost in thought, and bumps straight into someone. She looks up, and freezes. It's her. Lady Olga. Her former self. Shock slams into her. She barely manages to mutter an apology, her eyes burning with tears. Olga tilts her head, curious. She says she's never met anyone outside her family with amber eyes before. Stasia's brain completely shuts down. She never expected to run into herself. Before she can think of a response, a voice cuts through the air, asking what's going on. She knows that voice. She could recognize it anywhere. Olga turns and says she's doing nothing. Sergei steps into view. Stasia goes still. Olga smiles at him. She asks why he didn't wait inside. He tells her he just wanted to be wherever she was, since they'd be married soon. She laughs and calls him romantic. Stasia clenches her fists. That night, she sits in her room, lost in thought. All she ever wanted was a happy family. That's why she was so happy before the wedding. The marriage had been arranged, but Sergei had been kind. Affectionate. She had trusted him. She had loved him. Even if she proves she's the Marquis' daughter, how does she stop the wedding? She has no proof to fight against the arrangement. More than that, those two genuinely trust each other. She steps outside, hoping the night air will clear her mind. As she walks, she hears voices in the garden. It's late. Who's there at this hour? She moves closer. The tone, the way the words carry through the air, it's familiar. Too familiar. She reaches the garden. Her breath catches. Sergei is there. And he's with Ursa. They're together. Laughing. Close. Like nothing else in the world matters, Stasia hides in the shadows. Ursa asks if it's safe, since Olga is sleeping in the mansion tonight. Sergei reassures her. He says she's probably in her room, sleeping as always. She never does anything different, as if she's some kind of human clock, stuck in a routine. Sometimes, he even wonders if she's secretly a monk, since she never does anything fun. Ursa giggles and says it's boring. He smirks and tells her not to worry, he already has someone else to handle the fun part. Stasia feels her stomach drop. He never loved her. It was all a lie from the start. Morning comes, and she tells herself she knows the truth now. From this day forward, she has one goal. Revenge. No more doubts. No more hesitation. She needs to convince Olga to call off the wedding. She arrives at the Marquis' house. The butler eyes her warily, so she reports that she's here on an errand from Ursa to deliver a letter. He spots the seal and nods. It belongs to the Bathory family. He tells her to follow him. Olga looks surprised when the butler announces that a maid from Ursa has brought a letter. Ursa sent her a letter? That's unusual. Then she sees the maid's face and hesitates. It's the girl with amber eyes. The maid bows. Olga asks if Ursa expects a reply. The girl says she should read it and decide for herself. Olga opens the letter. After reading, she frowns. Who wrote this? The maid admits she did. Olga studies her. Then she makes a decision. All her plans for the day are cancelled. She wants to speak to the girl in private. Once they're alone, she asks again, who wrote this? The maid doesn't flinch. She wrote it. She confesses that she lied to the butler. The letter was just an excuse. She needed to speak to her face to face. Olga asks if the letter is true. The maid nods. She saw everything with her own eyes. Prince Sergei and Ursa aren't just close, they're in a secret relationship. Olga crosses her arms. Why should she believe a stranger? Maybe she was paid to spread rumors. Stasia expects that. It's hard to believe, maybe even impossible. She says she understands, but asks Olga to listen. She tells her everything. How they're half-sisters. How she saw it happen. Why she came forward. Olga stays silent, but when she takes the golden ring, her expression changes. The family name is right there. Everyone knows their father had many women. Plenty of people claimed to be his children, but none had proof. Until now, Olga stands, takes Stasia's face in her hands, and studies her. She can see it. They really are sisters. And Stasia came all this way to save her from making a terrible mistake. Before she can say anything, Stasia quickly tells her not to blame herself. The only one at fault is the prince. He toyed with her feelings and lied. Olga lets out a small breath. A smile tugs at her lips. She thanks her. This is a lot, but in time, she'll understand. Then her face hardens. There's no way she's marrying someone who would betray her. But calling off the wedding herself? That's not an option. The political consequences would be massive. Stasia nods. She knows. But there's another way. If Olga can't cancel it, then they'll make him do it himself. Olga raises a brow. And how exactly are they supposed to do that? Stasia smirks. Simple. They'll catch him red-handed. Olga doesn't know if it'll work. But one thing is certain. This time, things will be made right. Olga asks how they'll know when he meets Ursa. The maid assures her she knows everything that happens in the house. It always happens when Olga leaves for prayers as the saintess at the Holy Land. The moment she's gone, he comes running. She tells her what to do. On the day she's supposed to leave, she should turn her carriage around and return that night. Olga agrees. Night falls. Olga sneaks into the garden. She sees them, lost in each other. Her hands tighten into fists. Not yet. They can enjoy themselves tonight. It'll be their last time. She turns and rushes to the meeting spot. A carriage arrives soon after. Stasia steps out and thanks her for waiting. Olga shakes her head. Don't mention it. Stasia turns to the rider and gives instructions. They need to be discreet. He should wait somewhere nearby and lay low. He nods and rides off. Olga exhales sharply and asks if he really came. Stasia nods. She leads her through a hallway. If she follows it, she'll reach the detached building without being noticed. The two are inside, doing what they always do. Olga's stomach twists. She stops walking. She'll go the rest of the way alone. Stasia tilts her head. Why? Then she gets it. She only knows about it because she was told. Seeing it for herself is different. Catching her fiancé with her best friend isn't something she wants to share with anyone. Stasia hands her a small lantern. The room is straight ahead. Olga takes it and nods. She's grateful Stasia understands. Before she goes, Stasia says something else. When this is over, they should go on a trip. She always wanted to travel with family. Now that she has a sister, she wants to go with her. Olga smiles. That doesn't sound bad. Stasia waits outside, watching the balcony. Her mind drifts. A trip, who? That sounds fun. If only they had known sooner, they could have shared those happy moments. Her thoughts shatter when she sees something that makes her blood run cold. Olga stands frozen on the balcony, terror in her eyes. In front of her stands the prince. Then, suddenly, he pushes her. She stares at the lifeless body below, her breath caught in her throat. Her friend is gone. Her voice shakes as she demands to know why. He scoffs. Why is she acting like he did something? She saw it. He pushed her. He steps forward, grips her arms tight. His voice drops low. What is she saying? It was an accident. It wasn't supposed to happen. Her body trembles. Did he really have nothing to do with it? A voice suddenly cuts through the night, calling her name. She knows that voice. The butler. Her heart pounds. She quickly answers. She's inside. She tries to step back, but his grip tightens. They're not done talking. He tells her what the story will be. She fell on her own. A tragic accident. And if she agrees, he'll make it worth her while. She always wanted to be a princess, didn't she? He'll marry her. Her lips part. He can't be serious. He swears it. On his name. On the kingdom. She stands frozen, her thoughts racing. Far away, someone runs. She makes it back to her basement, but her body burns like fire. Her head spins, her world tilts, and then, darkness. Over and over, she sees it. Over and over, she watches death take her. She doesn't know if it's just a dream or if her own eyes have burned the nightmare into her soul. Months pass. She stands before a grave, fingers brushing the cold stone. Tears slip down, her voice barely a whisper. It's her fault. The world gossips. A fiancé who fell from the balcony. A tragic love story. But she knows the truth. She knows it won't last long. People forget. It's not worth remembering. Her chest aches as she thinks about how pathetic this has all been. She really thought things would be different this time. But nothing has changed. He covered it all up. The funeral is just another show. No real grief. No justice. She takes a deep breath, forcing herself to stay strong. She won't let this destroy her. She whispers a soft goodbye, heart heavy, then turns to leave. But someone follows. Rurak. His guard spots him and nearly jumps out of his skin. He's been looking everywhere for him. If he had known he'd run off after some suspicious lady, he would have saved himself the trouble. Searching a whole cemetery is not his idea of a good time. Rurak scoffs. If he had just stayed put, he would have come back on his own. He asks why he's looking for him in the first place. The guard sighs and asks if he even knows who the woman is. She looks shady. He shouldn't be running after strangers. 2 hours earlier, Duke Rurak had been in the cemetery visiting his 2 dead brothers. The guard came over and casually pointed out that the crowd had gathered for Olga's funeral, the prince's fiancée who had tragically fallen to her death. He wonders why they delayed the funeral for so long. Rurak figures it must be for the ritual. He adds that since the prince is involved, it's a delicate matter. The guard shakes his head, mentioning how Olga's father looks like death itself but still put politics before his own daughter's funeral. As they talk, movement near the cemetery fence catches their attention. Someone is trying to climb over. The guard nudges Rurak. Look at that! A whole royal cemetery, and someone sneaking in like a common thief. Rurak steps closer. The woman sees him and panics. She stumbles and falls right into his arms. She mumbles a quick thanks. He blinks. She's light as a feather. Not exactly the assassin type. The guard rushes over, asking if everyone is still alive. Rurak assures him they are. Then he looks down at her and asks if she's hurt. She shakes her head. Thanks to him, she's fine. He raises an eyebrow and asks why she climbed the fence instead of using the gate. She sighs and explains she just wanted to attend Lady Olga's funeral. But since she wasn't invited, she had no choice. The guard squints at her. And how exactly is she connected to the Tolstoy family? He reminds her that this is a royal cemetery. You don't just waltz in without credentials. She asks if they're from the Rurak family. They freeze. How does she know that? She tilts her head and says she saw them praying at a Rurak gravestone. Everyone knows the Rurak family rarely leaves their own section, and judging by how they're sneaking around, they clearly don't want to draw attention. She smirks and adds that since they both have reasons to keep quiet, they can pretend they never saw each other. A fair deal, right? She waves a hand dismissively, saying she has no time to waste. She needs to be somewhere. Rurak watches her go, then mutters to his guard that he only followed her to figure out who she was. But now, it's obvious. She looks just like the Marquis Tolstoy's daughter. The guard scoffs. The only daughter of the Tolstoy family is dead. Rurak shrugs. Tolstoy's reputation isn't exactly clean. A man like him must have a few illegitimate children running around. Still, something about this woman bothers him. The way she cried at Olga's grave. Those tears weren't fake. That kind of grief only comes from family. The guard crosses his arms and hums in thought. She doesn't act like a noble woman, but she talks like one. And she knows things she shouldn't. He grins and nudges Rurak. A woman that stunning is rare in the kingdom. It wouldn't be so bad to run into her again. Then he raises an eyebrow and smirks. Maybe Rurak had another reason for following her. Rurak rolls his eyes and ignores him. He tells him to stop talking nonsense and get moving. That afternoon, Marquis Tolstoy sits with his butler, discussing a marriage alliance. The butler hesitates, choosing his words carefully. That won't be possible anymore. After all, he has no daughter left. He sighs and bows his head slightly. He offers his lordship his deepest condolences. Tolstoy clicks his tongue in annoyance. What a waste. He raised Olga for years, pouring time and effort into her. She was supposed to be useful. He was about to start reaping the rewards, but then she goes and dies like a fool. And now? She's nothing but a disappointment. A voice suddenly calls out to him. Tolstoy turns, his brows furrowing as he looks at the young woman standing before him. She's beautiful, no doubt about that. But her presence is unwelcome. She apologizes politely for interrupting, but she says she wanted to greet him. After all, he's her father. Tolstoy narrows his eyes. Is this some kind of joke? A scam? He's in no mood for this nonsense. He waves her off and tells her to get lost before he has her thrown out. The butler steps forward, his face twisted in anger. His lordship just lost his daughter, and this girl dares to come here spewing lies? She should be ashamed of herself. She has no place here. She should leave immediately. But the woman doesn't even blink. She doesn't shrink back, doesn't waver. She just smiles, completely calm, and says that Olga already confirmed they were sisters. Tolstoy scoffs. And how convenient is that? Olga is dead. She can't confirm anything now. So why should he believe her? The butler glares at her, waiting for her to crumble under the pressure. But she doesn't. She just stands there, confident, completely unfazed. that same serene smile on her face, like she already knows the outcome of this conversation. Drop a comment if you want to see a part 2. See you next time.